opinion after all these years of experience on the size of a community and the workability of what you're speaking of? Do you think this is quite a large community? And I'm quite interested to know where you see there may be differences here compared to your communities.
Yeah, I think for me the trust and the honesty and the purpose of the community is so much out front. It's almost like a torch. Like if you were going into a cave, you'd want a bright torch in front so you didn't stumble, so you actually could reach your destination. I think for us the purpose is so clear-cut and so out front that the size so far has seemed to be pretty much fairly irrelevant because the purpose is out front. I know, for example, I've studied a lot of groups and looked into community living and everything, and some groups will come together more like co-ops, just more for financial reasons, to save money by pooling resources. Some come together with some religious reasons. There's been some pretty strange distortions in communities over the years, some pretty wild things that go on with communities. I would just say that's the ego just acting out. That happens with human beings as individuals or in couples or in groups, pretty much regardless of the size. I would say that if you looked at the societies of this world, even the cultures and societies, by most definitions they're pretty dysfunctional. With all the wars that we've had on the planets and even when there's a seeming natural disaster, the pillaging, the breaking in and stealing things that happens in human nature, I think most of human nature will say is a projection of the ego, and that this whole world is really a projection of the ego. So maybe Kirsten has some comments, because I know as we went along, there were times when it was just me and my little peace house and a small group around me, where you were one of the strongest proponents of size, of keep it small. Can we not keep it small? And then it just seemed to grow organically, where we would grow and grow in houses, and then we would move to another place and there'd be more acreage and more, and there was more, then other centers starting in different parts of the world. But I remember with the original Peace House, like you had your original caravan, when we had our original Peace House, she was like one of the strongest proponents of, can we not keep this small? Because I think you were afraid of there might be a danger involved if it grew in size.
It was responsibility, mostly. I felt that if others, well, for a start it seems so simple. It's simple when it's smaller, and it seems to take so much more time when there's more, because there's more thoughts to be exposed, there's more discussion time, and there's just a lot more healing going on, a lot more mirroring, and also this feeling of responsibility that I had. I was still washing this sense of self that really felt like I was responsible for others or for the healing.
She was in Greenpeace at 10 years old. So she had a very responsible for the world, for the animals, for the people, very, very young.
Yeah. And so then I'd taken on the role of spiritual counselor or spiritual healer. And so anyone who was coming, I immediately thought, well, I would have to be the one working with them or supporting them. And what I was shown was it was actually the opposite. It was that everyone who came, who was meant to come and who was meant to stay, actually they ended up reflecting me, which is just a desire to serve and a heart of devotion. And so the more who came, the more support there was actually, and the more wind beneath the wings there was. And I found that even though if there were kind of healing sessions or talks, and they did seem to take more time, it actually was rich. And yeah, it became richer and deeper. The more who came, the more there was being offered. So that was just really being washed. I think the fear of numbers, that it would mean that I couldn't control it. I couldn't be responsible for it. And so I had to give it over to the Spirit. And every time we go into a gathering somewhere, if I had that thought in my mind of, wanting to keep it small, David would say, "And you're all welcome to come home with me. I have a peace house and you're all welcome. Just come, just show up." And I'd be sitting there saying, "Oh my God, why is he saying this?"
Or even with materials, one time we were in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and before that trip, we would just burn CDs of talks and do little projects, resources. So we had these CDs. She burned, back in the day before there was multiple burners, and now it's all going digital, but burning CDs, she would burn the CDs and label them, and so she made a stack of CDs. And at the end of the talk, I said, "Oh, by the way, we got some resources there. Help yourselves. Take advantage of these resources, and they're freely given. If you want to leave a donation, that's great. And Jesus' Spirit, freely you have received, now freely give, with everything. Don't hold back and don't have reservations." So we did that, and she was just looking in horror as there was a Hispanic woman who just raced over to the table before Kirsten could get out of her chair to go to the table, and just in total glee just scooped the whole stack in one hand that she'd spent hours burning, and she was like, "Ooh," and probably said some words in Spanish and was just so happy to the Lord, and zoomed out the door before Kirsten could get out of her chair. Those are some classic moments we've had. And freely you have received, now freely give, because it was undoing this sense of that, and also watching the money, watching the donation basket, because Kirsten occasionally would how squirrels bury their nuts. This is a community where we have no ownership of anything, and she had stashed bank accounts, investments. She'd been like a squirrel of a human being, squirreling things away for a rainy day, and then
the queen of Plan B.
The queen of Plan B. Oh, she was going to make sure. The squirrels, they bury them, then they forget where their nuts are. They bury them, and they've been so concerned about not having enough food that they forget, and then well, that's what happened. She just forgot. She said, "Oh yes, I give it all for God. I give it all to Jesus." Wait a minute, what is that all? It just would come out little by little.
Why am I seeing others withholding?
The squirrel says, "Why am I seeing others withholding?" So she had to go through some beautiful cleansing around that. But I think the heart of your question too is that what we found too is people will say, well, with communities, you've got human nature. The ego likes to sometimes just be part of the community, to just not work, or just to kind of let their burden be lightened by being in a community where there's hard workers, and then some slack off. That's a size consideration too. If you've got 3 or 4 people and you've got one slacker, that's one thing. If you've got hundreds of people and you've got 30 or 40 people that are just along for the ride, but this and that, I think with our community, because our purpose is so far out front, that when we ask someone to do something, we kind of have this thing, I would never ask you to do something that I haven't done probably many, many times because of that devotion.